Betrayal that changes everything. A decision with no way back. Luke always believed in their love, believed that Lillian was his anchor, his unshakable forever. But one night brings a truth he can't hide from. Secret messages. A hotel. Room 367. Everything he thought was solid shatters in an instant. What do you do when a knife is plunged into your back, but your heart demands revenge? Luke stands before the door, behind which his past is crumbling to pieces. He doesn't just learn the truth, he comes face to face with it. But this isn't the end. This is only the beginning. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. Luke sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes locked on the empty space beside him. The silence in the room felt suffocating, broken only by the measured, monotonous ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Each passing second carved deeper into his mind, adding weight to the already unbearable pressure in his chest. His fingers dug into the sheets, his knuckles blanching from the force of his grip. Lillian was gone. Not in the way he had always feared, but in a way that somehow felt even worse. She had spoken about needing distance, time to reflect, to rediscover herself, to breathe before they fully committed to their shared future. Just a short getaway, she had assured him, a brief respite before they embarked on the next chapter of their lives together. But despite her words, a gnawing sense of unease had taken root in him, an inexplicable dread he couldn't shake. He had tried to dismiss the feeling, convincing himself he was overanalyzing things. Lillian had always been his anchor, the one person he could rely on without question. But lately, something had changed. Her laughter no longer carried the same warmth, her touch lacked its usual tenderness, and their conversations had grown shallow, devoid of the depth and intimacy they once shared. The connection that had once defined them was slipping away, and now he could no longer deny it. He had clung to hope, telling himself that things would return to normal once she came back. But deep inside, he already knew the truth. Lillian wasn't just drifting from him emotionally, she had physically walked away from their marriage, and now there was no escaping that reality. A few hours earlier, his phone had vibrated with a message from the private investigator he had reluctantly hired. The report had been damning, a meticulous breakdown of Lillian's whereabouts over the past few days. The places she had gone, the choices she had made, and the man she had chosen to spend her time with. Luke had read the words over and over, his mind rejecting them even as the truth settled deep into his bones, cold and unrelenting. She had checked into a hotel, room 367. His hands trembled as he set his phone down. He wanted to believe there had been some mistake, but there was no room for denial. The facts were irrefutable, printed in stark black and white. Lillian had betrayed him. A surge of anger rose within him, unraveling years of love and trust in an instant. He had given her everything, his patience, his unwavering faith in their future, his heart, and she had chosen to deceive him. Luke's fists clenched as he forced himself to breathe, steadying the storm inside him. Enough. His gaze drifted back to the empty side of the bed, but this time, the ache in his chest felt different. This wasn't just about her betrayal. This was about reclaiming himself. He had spent too long holding on to a love that no longer existed. He had lost too many moments to a dream that had already crumbled. His decision was made. Luke rose to his feet, his body tense with resolve, and strode toward the door. Without hesitation, he pulled it open and stepped through, slamming it shut behind him. The sound echoed through the apartment, a definitive punctuation mark to the chapter that had just closed. The night dragged on, but sleep never came. The silence inside the apartment pressed down on him, a heavy reminder of all that had been lost. Memories surfaced, his wedding day, whispered promises, the laughter that had once filled these walls. Now, it all felt distant, like an illusion he had been foolish enough to believe in. As the first light of dawn crept into the apartment, Luke found himself in the kitchen, his body weighed down by exhaustion. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his hands unsteady as he stared into the dark liquid. The space around him, once filled with warmth, now felt hollow, stripped of everything it had once represented. For too long, he had ignored the signs, convincing himself they could find their way back to each other. But the truth was clear now. Lillian had been slipping away for months, and he had let it happen. He had been blind, desperate to hold on to something that no longer existed. But that ended now. He set the coffee down, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without a backward glance. He didn't even bother locking the door. This was it. The end. Luke stepped into the crisp morning air, his breath forming small clouds in front of him. The city stretched out before him, vast and indifferent. But he didn't hesitate. His steps were sure, his thoughts clearer than they had been in a long time. He wasn't running away. He wasn't waiting for explanations that would never come. He was done being the man who second-guessed himself, who accepted lies as truth. Reaching his car, he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The low hum filled the quiet, grounding him. He pulled onto the road, the city passing in a blur, but he barely noticed. His focus was ahead, on what was to come, not what he was leaving behind. He didn't know what he would say when he got there. He didn't know how the confrontation would unfold, but none of that mattered. Everything had changed. The man who had once loved Lillian without condition, who had believed in their future, was gone. In his place was someone new, someone who refused to be deceived again. Luke pulled into the parking lot of the Jefferson Hotel, his heartbeat steady despite the turmoil inside him. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the steering wheel before stepping out. It was time to face the truth. Luke had always known this moment would come, the unavoidable confrontation. For too long, the truth had been buried beneath layers of deception, but now it was clawing its way to the surface. There was no escaping it. As he stepped out of his car, each stride toward the hotel felt heavier than the last, his body weighed down by the certainty of what awaited him inside. The lobby was unsettlingly quiet, the receptionist oblivious to his presence as he moved past, his focus unshaken. There was no need for directions. Room 367 was burned into his memory, an inescapable fixture in his mind. His fingers clenched briefly before pressing the elevator button, his touch firm, deliberate. A dull chime echoed in the stillness, announcing its arrival. The metallic doors parted, revealing the confined space within, and Luke stepped inside, his pulse an unrelenting drumbeat in his ears. Each breath came shallow, his chest tightening with the weight of what was to come. The man he had once been, patient, trusting, was nothing more than a memory. There was no turning back now. The ascent felt slow, agonizing, and with every passing second, the reality of the moment pressed deeper into his bones. This could not be undone. When the doors finally slid open, a dimly lit hallway stretched before him. He advanced without hesitation, every step pushing him closer to the moment that would strip away any remaining illusions. As he reached room 367, his heartbeat pounded so violently that it threatened to drown out every other sound. Laughter, muffled and carefree, filtered through the door, accompanied by the unmistakable clinking of glasses. His fingers hovered over the handle, trembling slightly. He had known, of course, had felt it long before now, but to hear it, undeniable proof echoing from behind the door, was a cruelty he had not been prepared for. The voices inside wove together in a taunting melody, and in that instant, the last remnants of doubt crumbled. She was in there, with him. The man who had taken what was once his, the one who had stepped into his place as though Luke had never existed. A crushing weight settled in his chest, pressing the breath from his lungs. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to leave before the pain could consume him entirely. But he remained. He would see this through. Drawing in a deep, measured breath, Luke tightened his grip on the handle and pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, casting soft, deceptive light over the scene before him. Lillian sat on the edge of the bed, her laughter still lingering in the air like the ghost of something long lost. Beside her, a man leaned in, his hand resting against her back with a familiarity that sent a sharp twist through Luke's stomach. It was an intimacy that had once belonged to him. He stood there, unmoving, absorbing the sight of what could never be undone. The man turned first, his amusement replaced by wide-eyed shock as realization set in. Lillian followed, her expression shifting from joy to pale, frozen horror. Her lips parted, but no words came. Guilt flickered in her eyes, but Luke felt nothing for it. He hadn't come for apologies. Silence smothered the room, thick and oppressive. Lillian glanced between Luke and the man at her side, struggling to find something, anything, to say. But what words could exist for this moment? Luke's voice, when it came, was dangerously quiet, his calm a prelude to the storm beneath. "So this is how it ends, Lillian. A cheap hotel room with him?" Her hands twisted together, a nervous habit he had seen countless times before. Slowly, she stood, taking a hesitant step toward him, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Luke, But nothing followed. There was nothing she could say to change this. His jaw clenched, his expression carved from stone. "Do you really think I'll stand here and listen? After everything?" His words struck like a blade, and she flinched as though she felt the cut. A darkness had settled in his tone, one that kept her rooted in place. "Luke, please." Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. He exhaled sharply, lifting a hand to silence her. He had wasted enough time believing her words, placing faith in lies. That version of himself, the man who had once hoped, was gone. What remained was someone forged in betrayal, someone who had finally reached his limit. "You think you can just walk away from this?" His words were cold, slicing through the air between them. "You think you can do this to me, and then come back, expecting it to be the same?" Tears welled in her eyes, her face crumbling beneath the weight of his voice. But he no longer cared for her sorrow. There was nothing left here, not for him, not for them. "You made your choice, Lillian." His voice did not waver. "Now, I'm making mine." Without another word, he turned away. Each step toward the door felt lighter than the last, shedding the remnants of a love that had been nothing more than an illusion. The man on the bed remained motionless, his expression uncertain, but Luke didn't spare him a glance. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. He paused at the threshold, the weight of finality settling over him. Then, without looking back, he stepped through and closed the door behind him. "Keep whatever illusion you've built with him," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But understand this, Lillian. I'm done. No more pretending, no more deceit, and no more us." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away, the door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. That small sound echoed in his chest like a gunshot. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, but the anger that had driven him here, that had kept him upright through the confrontation, was already shifting, transforming into something heavier, something colder. He had come to stand his ground, to reclaim his self-respect, yet as reality settled around him, he realized mere words weren't enough. His world had been reduced to rubble, and she needed to feel every fragment of that destruction. Luke moved down the hallway, his steps controlled, his mind focused on one thought. This wasn't the end. It had never been just about Lillian. It was about taking back what was his. Reaching the elevator, he stabbed at the button, his fingers unsteady. But this time, the tremor wasn't from fear. It was anticipation. When the doors slid open, he stepped inside, his reflection catching his eye in the mirrored panel. The man staring back at him was a stranger. The version of himself who had once loved Lillian, who had trusted her, was gone. What remained was someone different, someone unyielding. The descent felt tortuously slow, every passing floor stretching the moment. But Luke didn't look away from the doors. When they finally slid open, he stepped into the lobby with certainty, his resolve unwavering. Lillian couldn't simply walk away from this unscathed. She had made her bed. Now, she had to lie in it. Cutting across the opulent hotel foyer, he approached the front desk. The receptionist barely glanced up, offering a polite, rehearsed smile, but Luke had no time for formalities. "I need to speak to the manager," he said, his tone sharp and direct. The receptionist faltered at his intensity but nodded, motioning toward a back office. Moments later, a middle-aged man with neatly graying hair and a composed demeanor appeared. "How may I assist you, sir?" the manager asked. Luke didn't waste time. "Remove a name from the reservation for room 367. I'm checking out now." The manager's brow knitted together. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. Authorization is required from the guest who originally booked the room." A slow smirk tugged at Luke's lips, but there was no humor in it. "And that's the problem," he said, his voice eerily calm. "That reservation? It's no longer hers. It's mine now." Without waiting for an argument, he turned and walked out of the hotel. His decision was final, and there was no undoing it. This wasn't just about leaving Lillian behind. It was about reclaiming everything she had stripped from him, his pride, his dignity, his heart. She had left him broken, but now, piece by piece, he was putting himself back together. As he stepped into the frigid night air, something inside him crystallized. He was in control now, but that wasn't enough. She needed to feel the weight of her choices. She needed to understand that betrayal had consequences. Luke wasn't simply leaving. He was ensuring she could never return. Sliding into his car, he gripped the steering wheel with steady hands. The city lights flashed past his windshield, each one sharpening his focus. By the time he reached the apartment, the wildfire of his rage had burned down into something more potent, a chilling certainty. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the door and let himself in. No knocking, no waiting. This time, he was setting the rules. When Lillian appeared, her face twisted in shock, guilt flickering in her wide eyes. But Luke felt nothing for her now. No sadness, no regret. "Pack your things," he said, his tone flat, unyielding. "You're leaving. Tonight." Lillian's mouth parted in disbelief. "Luke, wait." "No." His voice was a blade, cutting through whatever excuse she had prepared. "You made your choice. Now you live with it." He had no interest in listening to her apologies, her feigned remorse. She had lost her hold over him. Be gone by midnight. With that, he turned and walked away. He didn't glance back. Her voice chased after him, pleading, desperate. But he didn't pause. He was finished. The man who had once loved her unconditionally was dead. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who had risen from the ashes of what she had destroyed. The air felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, he was unshackled. He had walked through the fire and emerged untouched. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it on his own terms. This story has come to an end. Trust is a fragile gift that cannot be restored once it is broken. Luke wanted to believe in the best, but he ignored the obvious signs. His mistake? He clung to the past when he should have been looking toward the future. In life, it's crucial to know when to fight and when to walk away with dignity. Never let anyone treat you as a backup plan. Love is built on honesty, not lies. If someone betrays you once, they will do it again. And the most important thing you can do for yourself is let go and never look back. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.